Hello there and welcome back to another video here on Wristwatch Revival. My name is Marshall. Thank you so much for coming along. This time on the bench, well, we've got a bit of a project on our hands here. This time I've got this Philips watch Chaux. It's from Switzerland. I don't know a whole lot about the brand itself. It says automatic on it, and I got this watch off of eBay for $25. Now, this is kind of what I dreamed of when I first started doing watch repair, that I'd be able to find cool vintage watches for super cheap and then repair them. And that is what we're going to try to do with this one. As you can see, it is not in good shape. It's missing the front crystal. It's missing the hands. The dial is just exposed. And it also doesn't have a winding crown and stem. And the case tube that those would go into is bent up. Let's take a look at the movement. We've obviously bit off quite a bit here. And if I can get this thing back to life, I will be very happy about it because, you know, this is kind of what it's all about, right? You try to push yourself and see if you can't take something that's really kind of a piece of junk and get it back together. As you can see, it's got a nice signed rotor here on this movement. This is AS1361. I had to look it up. But it's a movement that was fairly common, I suppose, for the era. The era? Late 50s? I'm thinking. Maybe 40s, but probably late 50s. And there we go. We got the movement out of the case quite easily. And also didn't have to take off the hands because they don't exist. So we'll have to address that later. Let's take a look at the movement. It is a non-runner, as we call it in the business. It is. It won't run. Nothing. No go. Can't wind it up anyway. Ooh, what is going on here, though? Look at is that oil on the bottom? Oh no, that is just pools of oil on the underside of the dial? Okay, this could get oh no, there is just oil all over this movement. Oh no, I think I know what happened. I've heard of this before, but I have to say it's the first time that I've experienced it firsthand. Apparently, there are some people in this world who feel that if a movement will not work and it's old, that they can simply dunk it in watch oil. The whole thing. And that will somehow fix it. And I think that that's what we have on our hands here. A movement that has just been outright dipped in oil, hook, line, and sinker. Now, that will do a couple of things. It will make sure that the watch can't run. It will absolutely lock that in. This thing will not go. I mean, the parts are sticking in my tweezers because there's so much oil on them. The other thing, though, is that it gives us some hope. Look at that. You can actually see the oil in the screw hole just pooled in there. It's all over the balance, which is, by the way, why it won't run, among other reasons, with all that oil on it. But I have a watch cleaning machine of the professional variety. And that means that we have a shot here to see what's actually wrong with this movement and try to get it running again. But it is going to need a very, very deep cleaning, among other things. So let's get the disassembly going. This is an automatic watch. And that, of course, means that the motion from your hand and your arm moving around actually swings that rotor that I took off at first and winds the watch for you. If you're watching this video and you're kind of going, I don't even like watches that much. Why am I watching this? Don't worry. You're not alone. This happens all the time. Watches are way cooler than people remember. And we're very happy to have you along. If, of course, you're a watch geek like me and you're watching this, well, I don't need to explain to you why this is cool. Okay, well, I don't have the winding crown, so I am going to try to let down the mainspring sort of manually by just jamming the click over and then just let it. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So I did actually manage to let down the mainspring. I have found more and more oil the further that I've gone into this movement, and the parts keep sticking to my tweezers because of it. I just can't believe somebody would think, yeah, this is a good idea. Completely dunk the movement in oil and then put the dial back on too. It's just baffles the mind. I just can't get the parts to come off of my tweezers. Look at that. Can you see how much oil's on that? It is just drowned in it. And at least everything seems to be coming apart reasonably. I probably should with that much oil. Oh, look at that. Yeah, so this thing's going to need multiple runs through the watch cleaning machine. That's my prediction. I mean, I'm going to have to, it's a solvent, and it needs to basically dissolve or somehow incorporate all of this oil. Take off the train wheel bridge to reveal the train of wheels underneath it. And we've got a lot to do on this watch because the first order of business is going to be to get this thing running. If it doesn't run, then there's no point in trying to replace the crown, the winding stem, the crystal, clean up the dial, any hands, that kind of stuff. Okay, yeah, there's still oil on the other side of this bridge, so it really did get absolutely everywhere. You can see a bunch on the top of that center wheel as well. Okay, so the barrel bridge can come off now. And that will reveal the winding barrel. That's actually where all the power for the watch is stored. Right in that big circular device there. Yep. Tons of oil under there too. I think we figured out the problem here, at least with this part of it. The interesting thing is, as we're kind of detectives, right? Like you and I are trying to figure out what's wrong with this thing and then how to fix it. But the big question that we have is, why did somebody decide to dunk this in oil? Right? It probably wasn't running is why. And that can be caused by any number of reasons. There could be something broken within it. It also could just be that it wasn't serviced in 40, 50, 60 years and it, stopped because of that. That happens too. Pellet fork just sticks to the pellet fork bridge here. Right? So, we don't know. We do know that somebody attempted to, I don't even know if I can use the word service. Talking about what they did to this thing. But, they did attempt to get it running again in whatever way they could. And that means that it wasn't running. So we still have to keep our eye out and not assume that the only issue is the oil. The oil is definitely stopping this. That is for sure. But it could also be other things. Keyless works can come apart now. Oof, yeah. Definitely getting some signs that this thing just needed a service anyway. There's still, the oil hasn't really dissolved all of the crusted on oil underneath like on the keyless works. At least not all of it. Okay, here's the motion works. This is how you set your watch. These are the gears that let you set your watch and then have the hands actually run. Well, we're most of the way through the disassembly, so that's good news. And the keyless works can come apart now. You have to change the cleaning solution on your watch cleaning machine ever so often, and I think I have a feeling that I'm going to need to change the solution after I'm done washing this thing. Okay. Setting lever screw are the last two parts of the keyless works to go. A little bit stubborn, but we got that out of there. And now the setting lever will just fall down to the bench like so. And it actually looks a little worn, perhaps. We'll have to see if that holds up. That part can actually get fairly worn. And that leaves us with the main plate and now the barrel. And we'll see what it looks like in here. I don't even want to look. This gets dirty on normal. Oh, God. Oh, God. Yeah, that'll need to be cleaned. Now, one little hint that we have here, by the way, is the mainspring itself. As you can see, it's made out of carbon steel. It's that kind of blued steel. And that means it's pretty old. Like, that puts this watch into the 40s, probably, maybe 50s, like we had guessed based on the styling. But the spring actually looks like it's in fine shape, but I'm going to reuse it, assuming it's not broken. And there's more oil everywhere because obviously this, I mean, oil's a liquid, right? So it's going to seep into every little corner of every little thing. Okay, well, with that, we can put the parts into the cleaning baskets and then get it ready for the watch cleaning machine. And like I said, we're going to have a few runs through. Look at my bench. Do you see all the oil that just fell just from having the parts sitting there? I'm going to get this cleaned up as we go over to the watch cleaning machine. This is pretty bad. I'm really hoping that we can get this going again, but boy, when a movement's been treated like this, it makes you wonder if you're going to be able to get it running. All right, well, into the watch cleaning machine it goes. Again, a solvent and then 2 rinses and then a drying cycle is what makes it up. And while I clean this watch, I did want to mention my Patreon. That's how I support this channel, is via Patreon. Basically, it's a way that if you like what I'm doing here and you want to see it continue and all that, help me out. You can go to patreon.com/wristwatchrevival. And yes, you do get a thank you card and a sticker in the mail, no matter what level you sign up for. In particular, I want to thank really everybody over there. But again, in particular, I want to thank Trevor, Spencer, Ross, Robert, Ralph, NT, Mitchell, Michael, Mikey, Kyle, Kim, Kevin, Jason, James, George, Erica, Dustin, Dominic, Colin, Brinton, Brian, Brett, Brad, and Alex. Thank you very much for your support. It really does mean a lot to me. As you might, guess, these videos are very labor intensive, and I have to, buy the watches and buy the parts and do all that stuff. So it really does help out to keep these videos coming. I love making them. I love sharing things that I find fascinating or interesting about the world. And it turns out that watchmaking is one of those things. And I'm honestly just thrilled that you're here hanging out with me. So thank you for that as well. Okay, so there we go. Ooh, it's hot. It's hot. The basket gets hot after being in the drying cycle. But let's take a look at how the parts look when they're all laid out and clean. Hey, that's a lot better. These actually cleaned up pretty darn well, considering, how much oil had been sitting on them for however long. Okay, so let's address a few of the outside things, the non-movement related things, before we get cracking back on the movement again. So first, we have the Whining Stem. Now, I bought one that says it's for this movement, so that's great. And now I have this gauge that tells me what size of tap, that's the screw threads, that it is. And basically the smallest one that you can put in is the one that it is. It goes into 10, or I should say the biggest, anyway. But it looks like it's a tap 9. Yes, so that goes in smoothly and feels like it's actually engaging properly. So I believe that this is a tap 9. And that means that I can grab my crowns. I have a few, they call these assortments when you get, a box that has a few different sizes of them. And there's a couple different styles that we can choose from. And we'll go with these ones. These are called simple crowns. There's also waterproof crowns, and we'll pick between them. I'm going to go on the bigger end. I tend to like the look of a slightly oversized crown. It's also a little easier to turn. So let's see if this one will work. And what we do here is we put this stem into a pin vise. And then we'll screw it in to make sure that it fits properly into this tap 9 crown. And yes, that looks like it's doing just right. And that way we'll have this ready so that when we assemble the movement, you know, part of the way through, we're going to need a winding crown to A, make sure it fits, and B, it's how we wind up the watch and do all that stuff as well. So we've got that ready. Now we need to address this situation. So this is a damaged, bent crown tube. Now you may not know this, but this tube is actually not part of the case. It's a pressed in fitting. And what that means is we can press it out. And I've got this little tool that is specifically made to take out and put in these case tubes. You can use these for pushers, for chronographs, or for the crown. So I'm going to pick this little die thing, and this is what's going to push down to remove the old bent one. There will be no fixing it, right? It has to be round. And as you can see, it just goes on the inside of the case and then pushes up against the case tube. And there we go. So we got out the case tube. And that means that I can replace it. Take a quick look, and there you go. So that's what it looks like without any case tube at all. And that's how the case is manufactured. Now, what we need to do, though, is find an equivalent replacement case tube. Now, I've got an assortment of these as well, but it was kind of like the throw the bunch of them in a bag type assortment. So it's time to take some measurements. I'm going to get my micrometer out. I'm going to measure the length. I'm going to measure the length of the tube part, and then the two, basically the two sizes of it. So this is kind of the outer tube diameter, the inner tube diameter, and then the length of it. And I'm going to grab my bag of potential case tubes, and I'm just going to eyeball the first couple that I bring out here just to see, like, does that look about the same? Yeah, maybe. This one's a little longer, but looks about the same as well. You know, it can't be too long because it'll stick into the case too far, but we can measure it and see if it lines up about with what the other one did. And that one does seem to be the right size. So let's give it a shot and see if we can make it fit. And then we can do a test fit of the crown to make sure that it engages properly as well. So now we flip around the tool, and we're going to use the other side of it to just simply press this in. It's not a complicated part of this tool. It just has these Delrin pushers that hold it in place. And then we just press fit this in. It's just friction fit. You don't glue it or screw it or anything like that. And ta-da! We have a new case tube. That's what it should look like. And now we can do a quick test fit of the new crown. And look at that. It fits right over it. So that means it was the right size. And it actually looks nice too. And it's turnable, meaning it's not going to bump up against the edges of the case, because I did use a little bit bigger of one that probably came on it. Okay, so now that we've got that ready to go, we can start reassembling the movement here and see if we can get it to run. It's been thoroughly cleaned, like I said, and now we're going to put it back together and lubricate it, and then cross our fingers and hope that it actually runs. And if not, we're going to have to do some troubleshooting. So there's the escape wheel going in. Kind of a little bridge here that holds the center wheel in place. Okay, we can get this screwed down. Oop, oop. Okay, and there we go. And with that in place, we now need to address the mainspring barrel. Now, this is an automatic watch, and what that means is we use something called braking grease on the inside of the barrel walls. And the reason why we use this is because the watch will get fully wound just by you wearing it, and then it'll keep winding, right? And as you might guess, you don't want there to be, you need it to be able to slip around the edges of that wall, but you don't want you want just the right amount of friction, and this braking grease gives you that. All right, here's the best part. Oh, you know how much I love this. Oh yeah, best sound, best feeling, never gets old. Put the mainspring back in the barrel. And just a little bit of HP 1300 on the top where the cap meets the barrel arbor after we put that in. Okay, and then this just is going to get press fit in. I'm just going to do it with my fingers. I have a little holder that can do it as well, but this one seemed pretty straightforward. So there you go. And now we can put the barrel into the watch movement. Again, the barrel is actually, they have numbers for the train of wheels. They also have other names. But when you think of the fourth wheel, for example, or the third wheel, the barrel is actually the first wheel. So that's the big boy. It even gets its own bridge, just like this. So there's a barrel bridge going into place. This is a nice little movement. Once it isn't saturated in oil, it actually goes together quite nicely. It's automatic. It's got a cool rotor. Just going to put a little tiny bit of grease around the inside of where the setting lever screw goes. That is a friction area, so you do need some type of lubrication, but also, I'll be honest, it helps it just hold it in place while you're putting everything else together, so that's handy too. Okay, now it's time for the train wheel bridge, which is a little bit tricky, and as you can see, I don't have it seated properly just yet. You have to get all those wheels into those pivots, so let's see if we can just, when it goes, there we go. See, when it goes down like that, that usually means that you've got it. And let's see if that is what you want to see. So if I turn the first wheel, what is it called? That's right, the barrel. If I turn that, you can see all the train wheels spin all the way down to the escape wheel. And that's what you want. Once again, escape wheel turning there at the bottom. And that's what we want. Okay, now this is part of the automatic winding works, and it's really interesting because if you look in the very middle, it actually has like a ratchet type setup where it can go one direction but not the other. I've never seen this before in a automatic winding setup. I'm going to use some grease because this is what I would use on the keyless works. It tends to be a fairly high friction part. And I'm going to assume that this one is as well. And so that's why I'm going to use that. I don't have a diagram for this. I'm not sure, even if I did, it would probably talk about the old oils that people used to use before synthetic oils were invented. I mean, I've got some watchmaking books that call for using like animal fat. I'm not kidding either. There's some weird, that people had to do some weird stuff, but now we're lucky and we have all these synthetic oils that tend to perform much, much better. Okay, continuing with the build. Oops. Oof. Okay, we got away with one there. All the watchmakers that are watching are like, because you see this little spring go flying, and those are the types of springs that don't come back. This one did, so I got lucky. Got to be careful, right? That's why I'm using that stick, but still sometimes it can just kind of get away from you. Okay, that's actually the click spring that I'm putting in, and that means with it in place, I can now put the click in as well. Try to get it situated properly before screwing it down if I can. I think this is the right screw. Yep, that looks right. And just a quick test to make sure that the click is screwed down and can engage with its click spring, and it looks like it can. Now the ratchet wheel, a little finicky to fit on here because it's a square hole, but looks like I got it lined up. And we can get that tacked down as well. This is another part of the automatic winding works. It's just a tension spring, I guess you would call it. It just keeps that thing pressed down. That is the top of that little ratchety part that I mentioned before. Usually when you see those, they're put in place so that something can turn one direction but not the other. That's what their purpose is. Okay. Now this is another part of the automatic winding works. It looks like a normal, just like a train wheel, but it's actually not. Oop. these go on top of this bridge, and then they have another bridge that go on top again. So they line up like this, but then I have to figure out, well, let's just oil this first while I've got, before I put on that bridge, I should say. This doesn't look right though. Right, so there was this weird part that looks like a little face kind of with very surprised eyes, I guess. At any rate, that goes on first, and then I can put a little bit of oil on these posts because there's these little tiny wheels. Just little baby ones. And that goes on those posts. And those are what actually engage with that small wheel off to the side as well. So those need to line up with each other, which need to line up with the other thing. And then I can try to put on the automatic winding bridge, which is what this is. And this, you know, the whole point of that, all the parts that I just put on, is that they take that twisting motion from the rotor and they turn it into little tiny winds of your watch that add up over time. Okay, make sure everything's seated correctly, and it looks like it is. Again, I've never worked on this movement, so kind of making it up as I go. Okay, yeah, things are engaged, I suppose. Okay, a little bit more oiling to be done here on the pivots for this automatic winding bridge. And now we can flip the watch over and start putting together the other side. So first we'll put on the cannon pinion. Just like that. And now the keyless works. Here's another ratchet. This is the part I was referring to before. Do you see how it has that similar design? And I'm using the same grease on that. Here's the other side of that ratcheting motion. This is called the sliding clutch. That little thing is responsible for when you wind your watch. That's why when you turn it one direction, it winds it, but when you turn it back the other, it doesn't. If you had a bicycle as a kid without any gears on it, it's similar to that. Or with gears on it, I mean, it's similar to that. Okay, so in goes the minute wheel and their intermediate wheel. A little bit of extra lubrication around the yoke, both on the post where it's going to go, and then it also meets with that sliding clutch. And so you want to make sure that, you know, that has a good bit of lubrication in it, just because that's metal on metal. And now we can put the yoke spring into place. Carefully. Carefully. Yeah, there we go. What? Not quite. Careful. Don't want that thing to go flying off. That's a pretty beefy spring. It can go some distance. That's what you want to see. Much better. Okay. Next up, the setting lever. Get that screwed down. And now we can put in the setting lever spring. And we're getting pretty close here to seeing if this thing can run. Okay, with that in place, there's one more little cover plate to put on. And then we can actually test to make sure that this winding stem is going to work. Again, it said it was for this movement, but you know, these movements, the company AS, that's A Schild, they made them all types of movements for a really long time. And you know, you just never know what you're going to get. I mean, I bought this off of, I think off of eBay. But that does actually feel like it's correct. So we can see if it's going to engage with the keyless works properly there. That's what we want to see. That's winding. And that's setting. Hey, this thing works. That's great. Now we can just do the kind of last lubrication on the keyless works, which is really down here around where the setting lever goes. And you really do need to make sure that you get this. Now, I overdid it here. That's a bit too much grease, so I'm going to have to adjust that. But that is a very, very high friction part, and it's on a spring as well. So you really want to make sure that that gets lubricated possibly. But I'm going to use some Rotor here to clean up the excess, because excess doesn't help. It actually hurts. It can attract oil or dust. It can lead to it draining to places that it shouldn't be. So you don't want to leave it sitting on there. So now I can put some of the grease onto the winding stem itself and get it locked in again. You may notice, by the way, that the winding stem is way, way too long right now, and that'll have to be addressed as well. But they come like that from the factory. And then it's up to the watchmaker to trim them to spec. Okay, let's get the pallet forks in. Pallet fork is in situ. And this is a little bridge that holds it there. So we'll just tweak around with the pallet fork a little bit to make sure that the pivot's engaged before we do this. Screw the pallet fork bridge down. I really hope that this thing runs. I didn't notice anything wrong with it, you know, obvious, at least, while putting it back together. I usually do a bit of an inspection on the parts on the microscope as well, and I didn't see, you know, again, no broken teeth or anything crazy. There we go. We got some wind in the watch, and the pallet fork is under tension, so that's another good thing. But of course, that means it's time for this balance. It's been thoroughly cleaned. The balance spring was completely gummed up with oil, making it basically impossible for the watch to run. But I ran it through the watch cleaning machine. I also put it in some one dip and kind of manually cleaned it. And it looks like it cleaned up nicely. Now the question is, will this watch run? It is sitting. Oh, there we go. There's some signs of life. So that's already really promising. Now, it doesn't look like it's running. Yeah, see, it stopped already. But also, we don't actually have the balance even installed fully yet. And the watch isn't wound up. So let's get the balance screwed into place and put a wind in the watch. The more you wind it, the more power it'll have. And look at that. It is running again. We have brought another watch back to life. And I'm thrilled with it. There's a little bit of oiling I need to do on the bottom part of the train wheel pivots, but this is awesome. We have now bought a watch off of eBay for really cheap, a cool watch too, and we have brought it back to life. Now let's get these shock jewels cleaned up properly. That also tends to help with amplitude. As you can see, they're completely dry. That makes sense. I ran them through the watch cleaning machine, and you know they've been through quite a bit of solvent, so you would hope that there wouldn't be oil still in there, but sometimes there is if it gets dried on enough. So now we're going to put the cap jewel and the cap jewel setting into some one dip. This is another solvent. That'll take off any remaining dirt or crusted on oil, and then it simply evaporates away. And now we can take some Mobius 9010 oil and put it right in the center. And hey, look at that. I'm getting good at this. And now we can put the setting back on, flip it back over, and back into the watch it goes. This suspends just the right amount of oil right where that pivot needs to be. And this pivot gets a lot of action. As you can see, the watch is running. It's going back and forth very quickly. So that's a lot of friction that it needs to kind of soak up. So now we can replace the shock setting. Done and done. Let's put it on the time grapher and see what it can do. Holy smokes. This is amazing. This is with no adjustment, by the way. This is just like put it on the time grapher and see what it's doing. And it's running within, what, 2 or 4 seconds a day, 205 degrees of amplitude, and an acceptable 0.2 milliseconds of beat error. I am thrilled with that. Really an incredible result. And that means that with the movement finished up, we can turn our attention to the rest of the watch. Now, this dial is really nice. I really like it. It's got gold indices on it. It has some cool fonts like from the 40s and 50s. I really like that kind of stuff. But this thing's just been exposed. As you can see, it's pretty beat up dial because there was no crystal on the thing. It was just floating around. I mean, when I got it, it was wrapped up in a little bit of bubble wrap. That was it. But this dial has been exposed to the elements. So as usual, I'm going to be very deft with this. I am not going to go hardcore. I'm not going to use any solvents or cleaners on it. I am not going to attempt to repaint anything. I know some people think that it's better to fully restore a dial by repainting it and doing that. I don't. I'm curious what you think about it. I find it always looks worse. So that's why I don't do it. And a light touch, I think, is needed. Now, I found these off of eBay. And I thought that so these go for the movement. When you buy watch hands, you buy them for the movement, not for the watch. And I got them and I actually like them a lot. I think they'll fit the watch stylistically, but I hate the loom. I don't know if somebody re-loomed these or what, but it's this horrible kind of bluish green. It looks totally out of place on a watch like this. And you know, these are the details that matter. Yeah, I could just throw these on the watch, but it will have this severely, in my opinion, out of place bluish green loom. And I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't. So I'm taking that loom off, even though I just bought these hands, and I'm going to re-loom them simply so that they look a little darker and not neon. So first we have to remove all of the existing loom. You do have to be careful when you work on loom as well. There's mainly two types for older watches, and one of them is radium. Yes, that radium, if you've watched any YouTube videos about radium and how horrible it is, you really have to be careful. These aren't. These were reloomed in a more modern way, so it's an inert substance, but some of them aren't. So you got to be careful. Okay, so now we've got all the loom removed. I actually ran these through the ultrasonic cleaner too. That removes every little tiny bit of the loom. And now we can set these up to be reloomed so that I can be happier with the color. I know I'm being picky. I know that, but I'm picky. So this is a loom kit. Powder, binder, a little tiny cup to mix it, and then an oiler to mix it up and apply it with. It's really simple stuff, actually. So this is the powder. And yes, it is white on white, so it's a little difficult to see. I do apologize for that. And this is a binder. Again, this is just a liquid that you mix with the glow-in-the-dark powder, basically. And then that makes it liquid so that you can apply it and shape it and put it how you want. And then it evaporates off and it leaves, kind of a cemented layer of the loom. And that's it. It's really simple. So we'll mix these. Getting the consistency the way you want is really what you're going for here. If it's too thin, you'll actually be able to see through the loom patches. And if it's too thick, it won't apply correctly. And yeah, that's coffee. I am putting some coffee into the mixture. And the reason I'm doing this is because this loom is white. It is designed to dry a very bright, clean white, which is a great look for most watches. But this is an old watch. And I don't want bright, stark white loom on there. I want it to be a little darker, just to take the edge off. And I have found that coffee does the trick. I know it's weird, but I've experimented with this and it works. It just does. Okay, so there's the loom going on. As you can see, it kind of fills in the gaps automatically because the consistency's where it needs to be. Coffee tends to make the loom dry into a grayish brown, I guess is how I would describe it. It doesn't really quite make it the same color as coffee. It's actually it just sort of darkens it is basically all it does. Okay, just get this smoothed out a little bit. This is the bottom of the hand, so you won't see that part of it. It'll dry nicely, and boom, we'll let that sit overnight. And let's take a look at what we got in the morning. Perfect. That is what we want. It is not this, you know, crazy bright thing where you're just like, wow, that really stands out. It just has a little bit of aging to it, and that's what I want. I just want to knock that kind of hard white edge off of it. And I think that these will go on the watch dial a lot better than if we had left it. And certainly if we had left it that green color. Okay. Hour wheel on, dial washer on, and we can start down the road of final assembly. I've got the dial that I cleaned up. It cleaned up nicely. It's not perfect or anything because it actually did take on a little bit of wear being exposed like that, but not bad. The dial's in fine shape overall. As you can see, it has a little bit of patina on it, but I like that. I'm one of those people. Are you? There's a limit, right? If it's just like destroyed, I don't like that so much, but a little bit of patina I do enjoy. Okay, so let's get this thing going into the case. We can now try out the crown, but as I noted before, the stem is going to be too long. So we will need to trim that down to make it so that it fits just right. And so the way we do this is we put in the crown as if it were normally mounted, and then we measure how much of that stem we actually need to take out. So we need to take out 3.7 millimeters of stem, but through personal experience, even some videos on this channel, measure 3 times, cut once, and then cut it long and sand it down, or file it down, I mean. Like seriously, once you cut this too short, you can't use it anymore. It won't engage with the keyless works because it's not long enough to get the parts in there. So I'm very conservative about cutting these now. I'm going to mark it to about the point, you know, the 3.7 mark, and I'm going to cut it above that because I have accidentally cut just a tiny bit too much off before, and it sucks. You basically have to get a new stem. So I'm going to cut it about here, and you can see I left a decent amount of the black marker on there. That's part that I left on purpose, and I'm going to take actually this kind of big file. It's a little big for the job. And there's 2 things that you want to do when you're filing these. One of them is you're deburring it, right? When you clip something off like that using metal, it creates sharp edges on the top. And the crown that you put it in is only brass. And what that means is it can actually tear up the thread. So you want to smooth those over. The other thing that it's going to do for us, though, is allow me to fine tune the length of it. I can use the file to just file off, you know, 1/10 of a millimeter at a time or whatever and get it just right. So let's see how our first fit went. And we'll do that. What we'll do is put the crown in, get it seated, put it in as if it were just in the watch like normal, and then see where it sits relative to the case. And I can tell already that it's still a little bit too long. That's okay. That is what we expected. Unfortunately, it does mean I need to take everything apart again, and then I need to take the whining stem out of the crown, and then I need to grab my file again, and I need to file it down, and then I'll probably have to do this numerous times until I get it just right. But it really pays off when the crown works and fits perfectly. It snugs up against the case, and it engages, but there isn't that annoying gap between the crown and the case itself. So let's see after a few times if we've got it right. Okay, that looks good already. Now we're going to still have to tack this thing down though to make sure that it sits correctly and that it also functions. Okay, yes. I can feel it that I pull it out. Let's see how it looks. Perfect. And I kind of like the bigger crown look on it too. I guarantee the crown that came with this was quite a bit smaller. Now, the last thing we need to do for this, crown, new stem job is we need to use some Loctite. And this just ensures that it won't unscrew on its own. This is a relatively mild form of Loctite. It's 222, and that won't lock it, as the name might suggest. It just means that it won't come apart on its own. Okay, now we need to replace the crystal, and I'm actually going to show you what how this rotor press works. Normally, I put a piece of plastic here just to protect the crystal, but I want to show you how this does. And these dies are made to press these down, so it's not 100% necessary. But the outside part of this top die is pressing down on the crystal, and then it presses it down so that it actually shrinks the edges of it. And now I can get the case so that the crystal's inside of the fitting, and now I'm unscrewing it, and then the crystal simply lets go into the case. It's a very simple operation, but these rotor presses are great at doing this. I mean, it turns this into a 2-minute job. And look at that. A new crystal goes a long way, particularly when the watch didn't have one at all. I'll use my air blower just to make sure that there's no dust or debris. And last but not least, when I ordered the hands, it did not come with a seconds hand. And this, according to the website that I found, takes a 0.22 millimeter seconds hand. I could not find in it. 0.22 millimeters just evaded me. I found 0.21 and I found 0.20. I found this one that looks like stylistically it would be a good match for me, but it is a 0.2 or a 0.21. I can't remember, but it's slightly smaller. So I'm going to use this. This is called a broach, a cutting broach or a smoothing broach, depending. There's 2 different types. This one is going to let me, yes, expand the tiny little hole there just by those couple of hundredths of a millimeter so that it will actually fit on. So this is going to be another trial and error thing. And all you do is put this in and then twist it. It's got a kind of a triangular shaped broach, and that cuts away a little bit of the metal like a drill, you know, like a drill would, or it's also called a reamer in watchmaking. If, you know, if it's attached to like a staking set. So let's give this a quick test fit. This is just by feel. Like I can't measure that. So can I? Yes. Okay. So I have got it to go on, but it's pretty obvious that it's still a bit too small. So I think I'm going to do one more run with the broach to open up that hole again. I probably took it from like 0.20 to 0.21, but I need one more session here to make sure that it gets up to the 0.22 of a millimeter that I need. You know, I'm just going to do it again. Again, this is a feel thing, right? I mean, I don't know how you'd even attempt to measure something that small. And believe me, I looked everywhere for 0.22 millimeter hand that would fit, and I just couldn't. I really like this one I found, though. There we go. Seconds hand is on. So we've solved that problem. There are a lot of problems. We are problem solving this go around, no doubt about it. So let's get the hands on. This is the hour hand. And the minute hand. Did have to do a little bit of tweaking of the hands just to make sure that they don't touch. One of them was a little bit bent when it arrived, and I kind of bent it back. Just little tiny tweaks like that. But the hands, you know, it's tough because these are the hands for this movement. But that doesn't mean that they're the hands for this watch. I don't even know what the hands look like on this watch when it came out. I have no idea. I'm just picking ones that I feel suit the style of the watch and the era. Now we can get the seconds hand on. Yeah, I like that. And just a quick push to make sure that it's engaged properly. I like that seconds hand. It actually matches up pretty well with the ones that we've got, so I was happy to see that. And now we can case the movement. Get our brand new crown on here. I still can't believe how well this movement ran. It really just goes to show that you need to take care of these things. Right? If this thing had been serviced regularly, the person who decided to dip it into a vat of oil probably wouldn't have been compelled to do that. Okay, just a quick check to make sure that the hands are aligned and that they're not bumping into each other. And now we can put the automatic winding rotor back on as well. I tried to see if I could address you can see the top, how some of you can see two colors of metal there. But what I realized is that the plating had come off on that part. And I wasn't going to, try to replate that or anything crazy. I think it looks kind of cool, so whatever. This watch also has a solid case back on it, so you can't even see it. But when I first got it, I thought that was something I could maybe clean off. But if you look closely here, you can see that it's where the plating has evaporated somehow. Okay, so there's the automatic winding rotor. And a quick check, you can see the automatic working underneath it. And yes, in either direction, it is in fact winding the watch, so that's fantastic. And now we can put the case back on. I just reused the gasket that came with it because I tried to put a new gasket on, but it wouldn't fit right. So I just decided to reuse the original. And there you have it. A beautiful Philippe watch. Chaux. I have no idea, if this brand is a thing or if it was big or small. But what I do know is we brought another watch back to life. This thing was in the junk pile, a non-runner with no crystal, no hands, dial exposed, bent up case tube, no winding crown, no winding stem, and apparently a somewhat abused movement as well. And it is no longer. I'm really happy with this one. It runs great. It looks good on the wrist, and it has that sort of old school charm to it as well. And yeah, I'm really glad I decided to take on this watch. It looked like it might have been a little too much for me, but we got through it. And after having fixed everything up, we've got a great watch. I want to thank you for joining me once again on this journey. I really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me and explore horology and watchmaking and watches and all just the cool stuff that goes along with that. It does mean a lot to me. If you want to keep up with me in between videos, you can follow me on Instagram. It's wristwatch_revival. And I post like project updates and some of the watches from my own collection and stuff like that over there. So I'd love to say hi to you over on Instagram. And yeah, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for hanging out. We'll see you next time.